Call the meeting to order for the legislative session of Wicomico County Council, number 2017-24, October 17th, 2017. Those who'd like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge Allegiance, please do. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, glory forever. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Entertain a motion from council to approve the legislative minutes from October 3rd, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion or corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Taylor. How are you?
Good morning. One item this morning, it's a public hearing. It's Legislative Bill 2017-11, which is an act to repeal Chapter 197, Section 37 of the Wicomico County Code entitled Speed Monitoring Systems. This bill was introduced on September 19, 2017, and it essentially does away completely with that section, which is the authority for having speed monitoring systems.
At this time, we open the floor for public hearing on Legislative Bill 2017-11. If you have any questions or concern, come to the podium. Please state your name and what those concerns might be. Okay. That concludes the public hearing for Legislative Bill 2017-11. Entertain a motion from council to approve Legislative Bill 2017-11.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, starting with Councilman Kilmer.
Aye.
Vice President Dodd.
Aye.
Councilman Matt Holloway.
Aye.
Councilman Ernie Davis.
Aye.
Councilman Joe Holloway.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Legislative Bill 2017-11 passes unanimously.
And that's all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Entertain a motion to adjourn out of legislative session so that we can convene as the Board of Health.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're now convened as the Board of Health. On the agenda today, we have a report on the health of the county with Mr. Lori Brewster, our health officer. And Dennis DeCincio, you're here as well. Good to see you. Mr. Calder, how are you?
Good morning.
Dennis, make sure you have a mic there. If you're, yep. Thanks. And if you could each state just for the public who you are and your title.
Lori Brewster, Health Officer.
Dennis DeCincio, Deputy Health Officer.
Bob Culver, County Executive.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. We have a lot of things going on in the county related to health and public health. We did choose items that we are working on as far as our community health needs assessment and our local health improvement coalition. They had identified areas that we needed to work on. The first item is that related to sexually transmitted infections. A few years ago, I had been here and reported that we had had a decline in our sexually transmitted infections. Well, that has gone back up. We are actually above the rate of Baltimore City in relationship to gonorrhea and chlamydia, particularly for our young females. And a large portion of those have been diagnosed in our local detention center for youth. And yes?
Just for the record, what's the difference in STDs and infection?
There is really no difference, and there are sexually transmitted infections these days. There's no longer sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah, I didn't know that, so thank you.
Yes. So we have been working very feverishly to try to address some of the issues related to the gonorrhea and chlamydia. We worked in conjunction with the chair of the Department of Pediatrics and wrote a letter co-signed by both of us, and it got sent to all of the pediatricians in the area, asking them to be very diligent in questioning and testing the young females that they're seeing. And we're also working with the Board of Ed. We worked with them to approve an information card with confidential reporting sites that they could provide to the parents. So more to come on that, but I will say our syphilis rates have gone down, fortunately, but we're not real happy that we have the gonorrhea and chlamydia increases in the younger children.
Did you say in the jails?
That's where most of them have been identified through the testing in the Lower Shore Detention Center for children. And I'm pretty sure that that's because they agree to be tested, but not all children are agreeing to be tested in the pediatrician's office.
Who is funding the treatment for these inmates or the ones incarcerated?
The jail does.
In that state or?
That's state,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
So on our chronic disease front, which focuses on diabetes, obesity, blood pressure issues, we're doing a lot. I'm sure you've seen some of the information related to our work on walking trails. We're trying to get people very active. We're still providing diabetes education and smoking cessation classes, and we're providing most of our smoking cessation classes off-site in the various communities. We also are working with the dental offices because people will go see a dentist before they go see a primary care physician if they don't have funds to see a doctor. So we have put blood pressure screening instruments in a couple of the dental offices so that they can do blood pressure screenings there as well. Speaking about adult dental care remains very limited in our community. I think we've done a fairly decent job of getting dental services to children and adolescents and pregnant women, but adult dental care remains a huge issue for our county. On the behavioral health front, our COAT team still out there plugging along, making a difference in the lives of many of these individuals that have overdosed. We have seen a small decline in the number of overdoses that are entering the emergency department. We had a 24% decrease in overdose cases, not necessarily adult deaths. The first quarter of 2017, we had a 53% decrease in overdose deaths, where the state had a 34% increase.
What was our percentage again?
We had a 53% decrease. We had 7 overdose deaths in the first quarter of 2017. It was 8 fewer than the first quarter of 16. And most of the other counties had significant increases. So we're attributing that to all of the hard work of the health department as well as the COAT team.
Where's that now as far as, because I know that early on they were saying that the state was going to model this for other counties, I believe. Where are we with all this exchange of information?
Dennis and I did a presentation to the Maryland Rural Health Association a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of interest in duplicating or at least modeling programs after ours. Worcester County did receive federal funding for a program similar to our COAT team. Washington County wants to develop a program very similar. So it's slow moving, but there are other jurisdictions that are looking to do what we're doing in Wicomico County.
The reason I asked is because we received a letter from Executive Shu from Anne Arundel County with his Not My Child program.
Right.
And they've been making strong efforts towards, the challenge of opioid abuse. I couldn't say specifically today how much success they've had, but I know they've been working diligently to try to address it. And I would wonder whether or not you would want to contact their coordinator. I could make sure you get a copy of the letter.
I received a copy, and I heard her presentation
Okay.
at Mako over the summer. And we're working very diligently with our local Board of Education to try to work on the curriculum related to health and the whole Start Talking Act that was passed last legislative session. I think anything that we can do to educate the public would be of a benefit. And if you would like, we can certainly bring her down and perhaps have her speak at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to exchange both of our programs, because we could benefit from theirs, but I think they could certainly benefit from ours as well.
Yes, and in November, I'm presenting again to the health officers group on our COAT team, because the state provided statistics on our COAT team, and so the health officers want to hear more details about it.
Yeah.
We did have a formal evaluation completed on the COAT team by Beacon, and it shows great program effectiveness, and they determined that for every $1 spent on COAT, it's saving approximately $7. So that's a very good return on investment. The other thing related to substance use and behavioral health is we are working collaboratively with Department of Human Services, and we are going to be using our COAT team members to respond to the Child Advocacy Center for substance-exposed newborns. So they've given us some grant funding to respond, to try to link those families up with treatment, because we know that it's a huge issue. If you go into the hospital, just sitting in the room with some of the infants is very, very concerning, because all they do is cry. So we know that creates bonding issues for the families, so we're going to be working with the Department of Human Services on that. The other thing, and I'm going to let Dennis speak to this because he was instrumental in getting the grant funding, we have started a pilot project with Salisbury EMS and PRMC called SWIFT. So I'll let Dennis speak.
That's the Salisbury Wicomico Integrated First Care Team. And what that team will do will be to target individuals who are high utilizers of the emergency room for non-emergency purposes. There are approximately 30 to 40 individuals who have seen the emergency department more than five times in the past 6 months. Some of those individuals have gone nearly every day, especially for non-emergency use. So that team will consist of a paramedic and an EMT from the Salisbury Fire Department, along with a registered nurse from the hospital, to do home visitations to get those individuals enrolled in this program, to help them either get into a primary care physician's office or refer them to whatever additional treatment sources they may need. And a lot of these individuals require additional access to behavioral health services. So we're looking to refer those individuals to hopefully get them the help that they need and reduce the burden on the emergency room.
You say they're individuals who have done what now, had 5 or more non-emergency?
5 or more transports to the emergency department.
Transports.
Yep, in the last 6 months.
Are you targeting what the transports are specifically related to?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're keeping this open as general as possible.
What happens to cause that? I mean, is it a recurring problem, or what's causing that specifically?
Behavioral health issues.
Or lack of social supports in the community.
lack of support.
Are we talking about overdosing in particular, or are we talking about something else?
We're talking about poor management of chronic disease, complications due to diabetes, COPD, a number of issues.
And how is the hospital allowed to release that information to you? Because I'm sure there's a client privilege there where they're not allowed, normally in a normal circumstance, allowed to share that information.
We have agreements in place that allow us to share protected health information.
So when the individual goes, they're relinquishing that privacy?
No. When the individual goes to the emergency room, that information, that data is captured by the Salisbury Fire Department and PRMC. Once they make contact with an individual, they will get them to sign releases if they want to be enrolled in the program.
Okay.
Those releases will then allow the health department to be a part of that referral process.
Okay.
Can I speak on that?
Please.
Some people consider it ambulance abuse or abuse of the 911 system because a lot of these calls don't require emergency transport, and a lot of times the providers automatically know where they're going, what the call's for, and it's an abuse of the 911 system when somebody that's dying of a heart attack could use an ambulance, but they're tied up on regular customers. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that'll help you.
Yeah, right. Makes sense.
So you're working with Salisbury. Do you have these problems also with county-run ambulances, or?
Yes.
Yes.
So are you doing anything with the local fire departments on this, or?
This program specifically will target individuals inside the city of Salisbury. That's where the majority of those cases are. If we can get expanded funding, then we'll look outside into other jurisdictions in the county.
Has there been an interest expressed from any of the local fire departments of trying to do this?
We haven't solicited interest yet, since the project is still in early stages, but the project was mirrored after a project in Queen Anne's County, which has had very good success. So we're hoping that this grant from Care First will act as some seed dollars and try to expand the program outside the city of Salisbury. Yeah.
Particularly looking at return on investment dollars. So,
Hey Dennis, is short transit involved at all? Because they do medical transport as well. Have you reached out to them to see if they're interested in helping with the program?
We have not reached out to Short Transit yet. If we can get these individuals who are eligible to get enrolled for medical assistance or Medicaid, then it's possible that the health department can provide transportation for medical assistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
and they had to receive special acknowledgement from Dr. Alcorta up at MIMS to do this program. It required special sign-off from him. The only other thing I wanted to mention is this Thursday, the 19th, we are having our first opioid forum at the Civic Center from 6 to 8. Jimmy Hoppa will be the moderator for that event. We are hoping to fill the Midway room. I think that's a little much, but we're hoping for a good turnout, because what we want to hear from the community is what they would like to see Wicomico County do to address the opiate issues in our jurisdiction. And like I said, this is the first of many. We're gonna do some of these throughout the county, but we did the kickoff in Salisbury at the Civic Center.
Is that going to be on PAC 14?
Yes,
Great.
yes,
And it's in the Midway room?
correct.
President Shine, that's the same night as your meeting?
That's one of those nights where there's a lot of meetings.
Well, I appreciate the efforts you're taking, just in general, but also as far as, reaching out for grants and getting the grants, because that's never easy.
Right.
But it's very good to see that happening.
Absolutely.
Sure. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
Anything else from the council?
Are you all attending the Regional Healthcare Committee meeting at the Tri-County Council office tomorrow morning?
I certainly am.
Okay. Are you attending?
I'm not.
Dennis is staying back because we have an accreditation body coming in to review our program to accredit us. So he's hanging back for that.
It's important.
Good.
3-day process.
Keeps you
Yes.
It'd
busy.
be a good idea to have somebody here for that.
Absolutely.
Hold down the fort.
Okay, all right, well, we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
very
Thank you.
much. Entertain a motion from council to adjourn as the Board of Health, and from the Board of Health to adjourn as the Board of Health and reconvene as Wicomico County Council.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We now reconvene as the County Council. Mrs. Hurley, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. President, County Council members, ladies and gentlemen. I have a couple of announcements to make. First, I would like to introduce our new Executive Office Associate, Lynn Sandy. Lynn started last Thursday, and we are excited to have her as part of our team. Also, the work session on the Personnel Manual to discuss Chapter 14 will be postponed to the first meeting in November. Continuing with the agenda, the next item is discussion on the fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2018 budget amendments. Council had a work session on this on September the 26th with the Director of Administration and Director of Finance. Today's work session is to ask any follow-up questions.
Wayne?
Good morning.
How's everybody?
Doing great, thank you.
How are you?
Fine. Rested. We, just to circle back to the meeting that we had on the 19th, we have budget issues with 2017. That year has closed out. As you know, we closed out. We believe that we'll have a surplus of approximately $1.7 million. However, we did not appropriately budget for principal and interest payments on our debt, and therefore, on that particular line, we have an imbalance. It would be my suggestion that we introduce a resolution to reflect that imbalance and that proposes the accounts that would be utilized to cover off on that imbalance. In 2018, we had several budget errors that we discussed with you at that last meeting, and it would be my recommendation that we introduce an amended budget that would reflect those budget errors, correct those budget errors, and in order to do that, to balance the budget, we would have to utilize some prior year revenue. And with that, we can have a further discussion, answer any questions you have. Dawn has the details, if you will, with regard to the account numbers, the exact figures that we need to address. I would add that I believe that if in fact the 2017 results that are unaudited at this point hold true, our total fund balance, available fund balance between undesignated and rainy day fund would be approximately $47.3 million. That represents about 44% of our total annual revenue.
Did you have a question, Mark?
Any questions you may have?
Is there, so what was presented a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, I forget exactly, is there any more information that's come out, or is that the extent of the problem?
Why don't I think the best thing we could do, Mark, on 2018.
Yeah, 2018,
Yeah,
yeah.
why don't I have Dawn walk you through the issues that present with regard to the 2018 budget so that we have an exact understanding here today as to what needs to be addressed.
Any questions on the 2017 budget first, amendments? Yes, Joe?
If I recall right, you were talking about the Board of Ed, the principal and the interest on that.
Yeah, it wasn't budgeted, Joe.
That was in 2007, that was 17, right?
Correct, and 18 as well.
Okay, but you said we could cover that. Where would the money come from to cover that?
I'll have Dawn walk through that.
Additional
Came from
revenues.
savings from other
From
departments.
additional revenues, the same?
Yeah.
As of right now, yes, we had savings, and throughout, we had an increase over budget of over 3 million for income tax, which covered the overage for the bed.
Okay.
You had mentioned in one section on finance with the Tyler Technologies, was
Yes.
that a difference of about 16,000 that came from salaries?
The Tyler Technology for 17 or for 18?
For 17. It said that this, finance was able to cover the
yes.
overage with salaries?
Yes, in the 17, we were able to cover it with an overage in salaries with difference in pays
Okay. And,
for the 17. For the 18, we will not be able to cover the 85,000.
Okay. So how, because this is like that minutia of issues similar to what we had when we were passing the initial budget. Okay, well, it doesn't really matter. We all know that we want the money to go somewhere. I guess the big question was how you do it, properly.
Correct.
So this fiscal 17, how exactly is the best means by which to make this formally correct?
I think a legislative bill
A legislative bill?
that makes the amendments go,
Okay.
makes it balance.
Okay.
You're talking about 17 or 18?
I'm talking about 17.
17, I think, a resolution.
Well, that's, Mr. Taylor, you had concerns, I think, on the same, correct?
Well, my only observation is that if you're moving it between departments, and in this case it would be, talking about 17 now, that I believe that should be done by the bill, because that's how the budget is passed. And if you amend, if you're going to amend a bill, you normally do that by a bill. There's nothing in the charter that says you can do it by resolution
Okay.
in this case.
Okay, so you and Paul
Yeah.
are in agreement. Good. Good.
Just
I would simply add that in the past, and the charter provides that in the fourth quarter of the year,
Right.
if you have shortfalls in one department that can be covered by overages, if you will, in another department, that the Director of Administration has the authority to approve those transfers with council approval. And we've always done that by resolution.
Right, but we're
And with
like,
a
we're
year that's
well out of
already
the fourth
closed
quarter.
out.
Yeah.
With a year that's already closed out, I don't know why we would deviate from the normal procedure that we've followed that's in conformity with the charter. Mid-year with the 2018 budget, I could certainly agree and I would certainly proffer that we need to amend that budget because we're mid-year in that budget. So to execute that budget the balance of the year, I can't assure council that we could cover these shortages in the balance of the year. I would hope that we could, but I can't assure you that we can. So I think that it's appropriate that we amend the budget so that it's balanced. 17's closed out.
Right.
Charter provides me with that authority with your approval.
I think what Paul and Bob are suggesting is err on the side of caution.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It-
It may be a
If you
little
wish to do it that way.
It may be a little overkill from your perspective, but I think it's,
Yeah, we'll get there.
okay. Just
I'm fine.
that's what we're here, it's a work session, right? So-
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody on, any council members on 17? Okay. Fiscal year 18.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Dawn walk you through
Okay.
each one of the errors, if you will, so that you can understand the errors, and then we can talk about the introduction of an amended budget.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll start with the workman's comp under Department 20. 195,404 was removed from the budget. From the notes that are in the budget projection, it looks like it was a misunderstanding that the workman's comp would be covered was the same as the EMT grant that we give $7,700 to the EMTs for workman's comp. It's not. I've gotten an estimate from HR. The actual cost won't be the $195, it'll be $149,925. So we do have an actual amount. Do you want to do questions after each one, or do you want to go through
Sure.
the whole thing?
Sure, we could.
Any questions on one?
Questions on one? Now, this is Station 2 and 16. What about Station 1?
I have not heard where they are in their process at this point with the state.
Well, this says due to our dropping Station 2 and 16.
It's covered by the fire agreement?
Yeah, this,
But wouldn't Station
there's a
1
basic-
technically,
Oh.
No, there's a
Station 1 was
basic-
technically dropped too, wasn't it?
no, there's a basic misunderstanding here. The workers' comp that we're discussing is the workers' comp for the county volunteer stations. We're not covering the workers' comp premium for Stations 2 or 16, nor would we have covered, well, we're not covering Station 1 either, because Station 1 still exists. This is for the county volunteer companies, and the misunderstanding was that the $7,700 stipend that is included with each one of the volunteer companies, the assumption was made erroneously that $7,700 would cover each one of those stations' workers' comp premiums. It won't come anywhere near that. So we have always, the county has always picked up the workers' comp premiums for all of the county volunteer stations. And heretofore, for the city stations, but the new fire service agreement altered that agreement with the city stations.
That would be why it's the 149 instead of the 195.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Questions? The second one was Department 17, Sheriff's Department. During the budget process, it looks like that janitorial services and maintenance and those things were moved out of general services. They were moved to the individual departments. All the other departments' budgets were increased for the amount. Sheriff's Department was not. So their budget is actually 25,000 short. They are working through that to see, and they will come back at the end, third quarter, fourth quarter, if they need to get funds from contingency for that.
So to clarify, we would not at this point in time recommend that we include that in an amended budget. We believe that that our department can cover that internally, or that we can come back to council in the fourth quarter.
For that amount.
Okay.
And in the fourth quarter, we would just do it by resolution.
From contingency?
Contingency.
Yes.
From contingency. Assuming we have contingency left.
The third item is for the Department of Finance. The new Tyler Technologies contract is substantially larger than before, now that they are hosting our products. For this year, it was $85,000, almost $86,000 short in paying. It was not budgeted to the new contract. So I'm almost $86,000 short in my budget. As of right now, I have about $20,000 left for the year.
So
Whether-
Dawn can't execute her budget.
I'll be out of money shortly. I'd like to do that one as a resolution from contingency, but if we do it as a legislative act, it'll just put some things on the back burner until we go through everything we have to go through with that.
And her suggestion for doing that is that the process for amending the budget is, of course, a longer process. She's going to be out of money in November, so if we do it through contingency, that money becomes available immediately. So it's a timing issue. If we had more time, we could do it through the legislative bill.
Well, on that, you mentioned before about some of this from prior years' funds, and so would that be, some of this would be the prior years' funds, and then maybe this would be from contingency? Is that kind of, you're talking about splitting it up? Because contingency you can do at, like you say, right now. Prior years' funds would be more of the longer.
Exactly. I
Okay.
think, Mark, that there are one or two of these that because of the timing issue, be because the cash flow is not gonna be available if we don't do something rather expeditiously, that we would propose that we do that through transfer from contingency. The larger amounts of money that we're gonna talk about, it's appropriate that we do that through a budget amendment, and we have the time to do that.
So the workers' comp, would that be contingency too? Or would that be this longer term?
Right now, we do have budget available to
Right.
cover that pending the legislative bill going through and passing. We could go either way with that one as well, but we are being able to cover the bills. Difference with finance is I know of bills that I have coming in the next 60 days that I will not be able to pay.
I'm, from my own standpoint, I'm reluctant to use a lot of contingency at this point in time, because we have not gotten into the winter months. We're not even halfway through the year, so for the larger amounts, I would prefer utilizing a budget amendment. Smaller amounts, let's try to live with it. If we have to do something from contingency, then we'll do that.
I really do appreciate you bringing this out in the open, because saying that I don't have the money, or I'm running out of the money, or I can't pay my bills doesn't sound good. It's a negative reflection on the county. Has this happened in years previous that you're aware of? It's never happened in the county before,
It's not happened during my time.
that you're aware
I've
of?
been here over 12 years, and for 5 or 6 of those years was very involved with the budget, and I haven't seen this.
And I think over the years I would have remembered hearing it in the news. Something that we've got to address.
It's a budget error, and it's unfortunate. I'll say again, it should not have happened, but it did happen, and we have to address it in order to operate the county appropriately.
And that's why we're here today.
And that's why we're here. That's correct.
Anything else on the finance?
Good.
No? Okay. Stormwater fees, of course, no one is exempt from the city's stormwater fees. We have not budgeted for that in 16, 17, or 18. So we do owe the city of Salisbury for stormwater.
And that,
However,
is that,
However, as I believe that I may have mentioned this at the last meeting, the city of Salisbury also owes us a considerable amount of money. So I think if we are going to amend the budget to reflect these sums, we should amend the budget for the revenue that is due us from the city of Salisbury. But, you know, frankly, from a business standpoint, I would say we'll settle up with the city of Salisbury at some point in time when we have a meeting of the minds.
The $23,000 in interest, were we being invoiced on a regular basis over 16, 17, and 18, saying,
We do
hey,
the
you have
billing.
past due amount?
We do the billing.
We do the billing.
Well, is there not a system then where we billed ourselves or something happened?
We did, but it was not budgeted for us to pay it. So I have the bills sitting on my desk. I have nothing to pay it with.
But what about last year when?
I wasn't involved last year.
No.
Or the year before.
so what's the interest amount? It's 19,000 in base and 23,000 in interest.
23,000 in interest for 3
We'll
years.
be, we'll be having that discussion.
So we,
We can get that.
How was those fees implemented?
They were implemented, I believe that the 16 was the first year,
So
July
they've
1st.
never been paid, though.
No. And I could see why 16 was not budgeted, because it came into play after the budget was being completed. You already had it before we knew we were billing this. So there, for FY 16, I can see why it wasn't budgeted. For FY 17 and FY 18, we should have taken into account other exempt, normally exempt is paying theirs, so we should be paying ours as well.
I know you weren't here at the time, but the county should have known this was coming at the time. And it's been mentioned, it's $23,577 more interest than the base of $18,900. It's hard to fathom. Why does the county have to pay this fee? You would think that we would be exempt from
No one is
this.
exempt from
Yeah,
this.
and this is the,
Is this for the city or the
this
state?
is the so-called rain tax.
Yes, I
This is the
understand that.
so-called rain tax. And when it was initially implemented, when it was passed by the city, there was confusion as to whether or not public entities were exempt from this tax. And that was explored, it was vetted, and we learned that by state law, public entities are not exempt. And that may have confused people initially in that first year. But we clearly had that ruling sometime in that first year and understood.
You had to
because the Board
clarify.
of Education asked us the same question.
Right.
And also independently vetted it and learned that, no, they're subject to it. So it should not, that mistake the first year, I can understand, I can't understand the mistake in 17 and 18.
Right.
It should have been budgeted. And the bills.
I think it's fair to the public that they understand that the county has to pay the city a fee. Do you know that if the state that has buildings within the city, are they paying this stormwater fee
My
to the city?
understanding is no one's exempt, Larry.
But you don't know if the state is
I
paying?
have not looked at that. I could look at that if you'd like.
That,
me to.
I would like
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah, I could look at that. We could look at that.
Thank you.
Yes.
If the county owed 18,000, that's in the base, it says, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was 23,000 in interest on the other.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, 3 years worth. It racks, you go back 2
What kind of
years
interest
on.
What kind of interest are they charging? I mean, is it 18,000 for?
It's hard to fathom.
It may
I know.
include,
Yeah, a year and we owe.
it may include penalties, Joe.
I can break that broken down for
We'll
you.
break it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's time to ask for a waiver.
And I
We already
will, yes, I am very willing to go ask for.
Well, it's like
a
this
waiver for
building.
that.
I mean, we're assessed on this building.
Yes.
Correct.
So the city uses this building, so shouldn't half of that be?
As I said earlier, we need to,
You're
we need to,
discussing.
we need to have a
So
settlement
you
with
would
the
like a
city and we'll
breakdown
do
of the
that.
principal and the interest
Yeah,
for the
Yeah.
I'm just looking,
stormwater?
you know,
Sure.
when your interest is more than your principal here, that's kind of,
Probably
Absolutely.
penalties and
I
administrative
think it's,
fees.
I think it's driven by penalties.
I don't have that off with me, but I do have that at my desk.
my colleague here says it sounds like a payday loan.
It does. And I'm just surprised we're even seeing that.
The county initiates this bill, it goes to the county, and you're saying that this whole process just sat on one person's desk? Because, I mean, we have a finance department as a whole, and I would really think that there was somebody else that might have been looking at something and saying, hey, this is still an outstanding bill, or is it so isolated to just one or two individuals?
John, to be honest with you, it's hard for us to reconstruct exactly what happened because some of the people who were involved are no longer here. Suffice it to say, it should not have happened.
Okay.
Mr. Cannon? Yeah, could I offer just one, this may
Yes.
address some of the things you've been talking about, but
Sure.
it might be helpful to have a quarterly, maybe monthly report by the Finance Department for any transfers into a department, either from contingency or from surplus revenue, or for that matter, any other department. I think if that had been in place, there would have been an early warning sign on some of these things that have happened. They are sort of original budget errors.
Right.
That shouldn't be hard to do with Munis. I mean, that ought to be something that can be whipped out in 30 seconds, I would think, if it's anything like the software I've used.
We actually have a weekly budget flash report that we've developed. It's one of the things that I asked Dawn to do immediately when she came in. It's produced weekly, and it gives you a comparison, budget actual, by department, by line. So I think, to your point, Bob, that would be very helpful.
I like the suggestion
I can
of,
provide that to
but I
council
think
if you'd like.
quarterly's too long. Can you do the weekly report
Give
to
it to
us?
you weekly.
Would everybody else like to see that? I think these mistakes would be
I
caught.
think as long as the administration's seeing
I'm
it,
seeing it now.
that's what's critical.
And that's originally, John, how we caught the fact that we had a problem with the 17 P&I, because the first flash that we got showed that P&I was over budget. And the question I asked Dawn was, how the heck can P&I be over budget? It's, you know, it's a very discrete number.
Right.
And when we dug into it, that's how we found. Now, one of the things that I will say that this budget actual flash, you have to understand how the payments by line are made during the year. Because right now, there are several departments, I call them departments, but say SWED, 100%'s been paid out. Well, that's because we pay them in a lump sum at the beginning of the year. Other departments have seasonality, like Parks and Recreation. So it's not as though you can look at it each month and say, well, they should have spent 1/12 of their money. That then gets into the level of detail by which we want to budget. It'd be wonderful if we budgeted each department and each account in that department by month, but that's a Herculean task. And I don't know what we would really gain from that. So where we started was, let's have this budget actual flash that we look at each week and have each department head look at it. And the departments are looking at their budgets anyway, but at least at a higher level, we can stand back, look at it and say, hey, does something here just simply not look right? So any council member who wants to see that report on a weekly basis, happy to provide it to you.
Feel free to send it to me.
I think what I was suggesting might be a little different. It was only if money is transferred between departments.
I can't do that without council approval.
Well, I mean, maybe council can approve. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to do.
No, money is not
technically.
transferred
We don't
between
transfer money.
departments without council
Well,
approval.
including contingency and surplus funds
We'd
as
already know about
departments.
It's done by resolution.
It's only done by
already know about it.
council,
So,
with
well,
council
Yeah.
approval.
And it can only be done
Yeah.
in the fourth quarter when you go
The-
between departments.
yeah.
And it can only be done in the fourth quarter when you go between
Between
departments.
departments.
The other suggestion I would make was on the budgets themselves. I'm talking about the budget documents now. The mistakes here, since they're original mistakes, have led to a kind of a misleading aspect. For example, if you look at this year's budget, it would indicate that last year, in 17, the Board of Ed debt service was 10.5 million roughly. And that's what it was originally. Now you're adding another 1 million, so it's coming up to 11.5 million. So if you look at your budgets, they're now inaccurate in that sense. And I distinguish that from, for example, gasoline prices go up, so your estimate of gasoline is a little off, and you have to add a little money. I mean, that happens during the year. That's one of those things. This is what I'd call an original error. And it seems to me to make sense to go back and note that on the budget documents. So, for example, if you were looking at this year's budget, you wouldn't conclude that, well, gee, debt service for the Board of Ed went up $1 million. Because it really didn't. It was understated for the prior year.
You're
It
still,
did go up. We sold bonds last year.
Yeah.
well, are you saying, though, that when we look at next year's budget, what has been funded for the prior year would be misleading?
That's another aspect. It could be, depending on how those figures are reported. But I'm looking at this year's.
Next year's budget will show the
A
adjusted
different amount
amounts.
as well, because we're possibly going to bond sale. Again, this year, the principal and interest goes up if we have bond sales. So it's never going to be the same amount year after year after year. They're always going to change. If we don't go to bond sale, they may go down. FY19, starting in FY19, we have a big decline in our payout ratio. So if we weren't to go to bond sale, we would see our payments go down.
Well, I think,
We did not
I think we're talking about two
increase
different
18's
things.
budget to cover 17 shortfall.
The reason
I understand that.
the reason I'm proposing, one of the reasons I'm proposing that we do an amended budget for 18 is for that very reason. So that because when we take up the 19 budget, we won't have 18 actual figures yet. So we'll all be guided by basically two things. You know, what does the proposed 19 budget request look like compared to the 18 budget request? So we always look at that, but the other thing that I always we look at is how does it compare to the actual spend rate? Because it's sometimes your spend rate is actually curving either down or curving up, and that has an impact on your assumptions for the next year's budget. So looking simply budget to budget doesn't get you where you need to go.
Right.
But, for instance, looking at 18 now and casting it out for the balance of the year, what I'm looking at are the preliminary 17 actual results unaudited to see, hey, do we have any other wobbles? And we always do that. That's just a natural course of business. So again, that's further reason to make the changes here through a legislative budget amendment. So that in April, when you're looking at this again, you're looking at a corrected 18 budget versus what's being requested for 19.
When you talk about sending this information, if you go to our website that we have now, a lot of this stuff has not been updated since 2016. If I go to monthly revenue reports, you know, 9 of 17 was the last entries made in.
Correct.
Why is this being kept? You know, the P card reports are the same way.
When we had our closed work session, I explained how I dealt with that.
Can you explain it again? I must have not missed that part of the conversation.
We have a new finance director.
Okay, all right.
We also have, and I don't know if you recall, the transparency module where all of this, and not necessarily the P card transactions, but any information about the budget would be available at your fingertips at any time. It is refreshed every Friday during the
And
night.
that is on the website?
It is on the website called Open Checkbook.
Open check, yeah,
Yes.
I've seen it, yeah, okay, I've seen that, but the other, like I say, the other's not been updated since you've been there, you haven't had a chance to do that.
No. Well, we were in the process of closing the year. The numbers get,
That's fine.
yeah.
Well, what I was getting at, until that's brought up to date, you're offering more reports, and that's not even available yet, so I guess,
If you would like them out there, we can
Yeah.
start putting them back out there again.
well, I mean, were you planning on putting them back out there again anyway, or not?
My understanding when we got the transparency modules, that was because it was available through there. We weren't going to be doing the report as much. I don't mind having the reports done, though. I thought they were very useful reports. And
You're saying they're very useful.
I think they are.
Okay. Well, I mean, they're on the website
It may be
for
a
us to go
duplicate.
there. If somebody, a citizen goes there and looks and says, well, look, nobody's been here since 2016, what's going on?
Sure.
You know, it doesn't look too well. Okay.
The
That's a
18,
decision for you guys all to make, and let us know what you're doing, I guess.
sorry. The 18,900 is a small number in relative to the whole budget, but the process is what you deal with, Mr. Roser. Any input on your part as far as, I guess, the measures that are being taken now are sufficient in as far as your perspective as an auditor?
We really haven't done a definitive study on that. We do have more resources coming, and we intend to work closely with the administration as much as we can to try to bridge these sort of things between council and the executive so that we can all understand what's going on. There are a few things in the pipeline that we can discuss.
Yeah, part of why, there was questions as to why we were hiring, an assistant auditor for Mr. Rose, and part of that is because over the last couple of years, we've realized that one of their primary functions probably should be to review the budget when it comes into the council. Because there's such a limited amount of time, you get about 9 months to go over all this, or 6 months, or whatever the term might be, but everybody, all the departments get to fine tune where they think they're gonna be heading the next year, and then the council gets a very limited amount of time to review an awful lot of data. And we think it'll probably be a really plus for Mr. Rose's office to be able to now, and as well as Mrs. Hurley too. They did a little more in depth last year.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They
a
did.
lot. And
They
which
asked a
was
lot of questions.
Yeah, which was
good.
great.
Yep.
But we think we want to even go further, and it's all to, make sure that by the time we're done, what's at the
doesn't
table
happen.
is a perfect product, so
Absolutely.
that'll be great, that'll be good. Any other questions on this particular item? Okay.
I think we're with the state's attorney's office, janitorial supplies again. This wasn't a case where they weren't part of the exhibit for moving this from general services to state's attorney's office. In prior fiscal years, they had gotten their supplies from general services, so they did not budget for it. Now, they are looking at being able to cover those costs themselves, and again, if they come into a shortfall at the end of the year, they'll address it then.
Why didn't you have a figure for the state's attorney?
Why don't I have a figure?
Yes,
It would be an estimate.
Okay.
I did ask general services what they thought it would be, and they said between $4,000 and $5,000. But I don't know for sure because it was never really, it was just part of the government office budget, so it was just an estimate of what they thought it would be.
So next year, we would expect to see that figure
We
in the
created
budget?
an account for them so that they will, in that account, put their invoices and pay out of that account so that they know what to budget for next year.
Okay,
So they'll have a more accurate number.
sounds good.
PEG fees was a new agreement in FY17. It looks like we're gonna receive about $125,000 a quarter from Comcast in PEG fees. Next year, we'll budget for that in the revenue. This year, it'll be unanticipated again, unanticipated revenues. If PAC 14 comes with invoices, I'll be coming back to ask for a request to accept the unanticipated revenues in order to pay those invoices. And then the big one, which is part of the reason we're here, is the Board of Ed and the county debt service, principal and interest, were not budgeted to the debt schedule for FY18. The Board of Ed portion is minimal. Now, the amounts that I have do not include an estimate for the bond sale that we could possibly have this year, this fall. I'll have to get updated amounts before we do the legislative bill. I have those numbers now, to make sure that we don't have a shortfall with any payments that we may have due in fiscal year 18. Without the estimate for the 2017 bond sale, it's $8,900 for the Board of Ed and $1.2 million for the county. And what happened is those numbers just came forward. Last year's numbers were brought forward to this year. So they didn't get updated to the bond, to our bond debt schedule.
Well, it's unfortunate all this happened, but I guess the fortunate thing is we are seeing an increase in revenues. So it can be rectified. 8 years ago, it would have been an entirely different story if these mistakes had been made.
You're right.
So, we've been looking at layoffs and various different ways, so.
I mean, I'm hopeful, at the end of the day, I'm still hopeful that because we still have increasing revenue, principally through income taxes, that we'll be able to cover this, but I still think it's appropriate to prepare an amended budget, because I can't guarantee that we're gonna be able to cover it. But you're right, Joe.
And I guess the legal question is, in the charter, there's not really any method for an amended budget, but we kind of just treat that as amending a legislative act since we passed the budget by a legislative act. If you look through the budget, it's silent. It doesn't say one way or the other.
Yeah,
so.
it's what I would call one of the gaps in the charter, if you will. But I would agree with you that, the manner in which you do it is you treat it as any other piece of legislation.
Okay.
But I would defer to the respective attorneys.
If we're amending, except for that charter provision which allows the resolution for the transfer of funds,
yeah.
other than that,
Fourth
I think
quarter.
we should go to legislative act amendment.
PAC 14, 80 cents per subscriber. Was that being allotted directly to PAC 14?
No,
Or
we
was that
are,
going to the general fund and then we were budgeting for PAC 14?
these are for capital expenditures
Capital
for PAC
expenditures,
14.
okay.
Yes,
It's earmarked, Joe.
it is earmarked, and, but we are the flow.
We're the custodian, if you
Yes.
will.
Okay, because in the budget itself, it's referencing operating,
Correct.
okay.
The PEG fees
No.
come into us. They're earmarked for specific types of expenditures. When PAC 14 requests those types of expenditures and they're approved, then they're funded through these PEG fees.
So where are we gonna drop this 125 in the amended budget?
It would be a revenue under PAC 14.
Just additional.
Right now, the expense line that you're looking at does not include any expenses that they are wanting to pay out of PEG fees for this upcoming year.
Okay,
That is our normal operating appropriation that we give to them.
okay.
They would come back if there's any other updates that they want to do, using the PEG fees, but the PEG fees are earmarked for capital.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions? So, what's our timeline now, as far as,
What my suggestion would be, John, is that we could prepare proposed legislation that would provide the details as to what has to happen, present it to council, and go through the normal legislative process. And we can do that very quickly.
okay. Okay. Any questions from anyone else? No? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is discussion on an amendment to the capital improvement plan for the Newland Park landfill Cell 9 construction project, and we have Mr. Dallas Baker, Director of Public Works, here.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning. You just state your name, position for the public, please.
Sure. Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration.
Dallas Baker, Director of Public Works.
Where would you like to start?
Well, Cell 9 is the landfill has 10 cells total that it's been permitted for, which is basically different parts. And as one part fills up, we construct another one. This isn't part of the expansion, this is just part of our general work plan. The original permit included all 10 cells. They're not numbered sequentially, so when I say cell 9, it's not like we've only got one more cell left. We actually have four cells. This is the 7th cell we would be building. The numbering system's a little confusing, so I don't. Yeah, exactly. There's 3 more after this one. We went out for bids. We had $5 million budgeted, and when they came back with the bids, we had the low bid, the apparent low bidder came in at a little under $5.3 million. We have money in our budget in solid waste to fund the additional money for construction. And so we're here presenting this because it's going to, from what I understand, it requires an amendment to the CIP in order to actually move the money into the account so that we can get the work started and awarded.
And that's the 300,000
Yes, exactly.
requested.
Dallas, how does this compare to the last cell we opened as far as the cost of opening it, or can you compare it due to the size? Is it comparable size-wise or whatever? Does anybody remember that?
I can touch on that. It's slightly smaller footprint than what we call cell 6, which is the active cell now. So the big cost, which
is detail, I guess, of the various parts of new cell construction is what the clay costs are. And if you go to the second page that was provided, the alternatives A1 and 2, and then the alternative B, those were two different types of clay options. B was a thicker, less permeable clay, which tends to be harder to get a hold of, and that's why we believe only one bidder bid on that, and the price was so expensive. So it's hard to compare because it's slightly different. The way you want to look at it, and I think it'll be interesting to see as it's being constructed, is there's an underground drainage system which collects the leachate. So depending on how things flow and how big the cell is, you may need 2 drains. In this case, I believe it's just 1, and then connecting into the existing system. I believe also as part of this project, it included putting in gas collection for cell 6. So until gas collection goes into a cell, methane is produced and it just is released into the atmosphere. As part of this project, we will drill wells into the existing cell 6, capture that methane. It goes to the third party Wicomico, which produces electricity, and then we get some of that revenue.
Right. You said you believe. Does that mean you're not definite?
Sorry, I haven't been hands-on with this project in a while. Yes, Dallas nodded. So it is the gas collection
so we
in
will
cell
be capturing
6.
that
Correct.
methane gas?
Correct.
Okay.
Why does the third party not pay for the installation of the drilling and, for the capturing?
It's part of an old agreement that we've had with Wicomico, and my understanding is in other counties, in other landfills, because sometimes the county doesn't operate the landfill, all of the infrastructure is owned by that third party. And that means they control how much gas they pull or don't pull. If you pull too much gas, you can actually increase the chance of a fire occurring. So historically, Wicomico has owned the infrastructure there such that we control the flow of the gas. So we could possibly get slightly more revenue by letting them run things to be as efficient as possible, but that it increases our liability. And if you really look at what we're getting paid for the energy produced, it is pennies on the dollar.
What is the lifespan of this cell until we have to do another one?
We're expecting about another 5 years.
Yeah.
Would it be cost efficient to do 2 at one time?
Not real, well, it's not so much the cost efficiency. When you put the liner in and you start constructing the cell, think of like you're building a bowl, and all it's gonna do is just collect water, and it starts collecting the rainwater. You've got to put in the drains like Wes was talking about that pumps the leachate out. We don't want to be collecting rainwater and pumping that into our leachate tanks, because all it's going to do is just have to treat something that doesn't need to be treated.
Okay. We did originally look at that just in terms of footprint, but ultimately the maintenance that it would take to maintain such a large open area, we decided to opt for just 1 cell at this point.
How long, Councilman Matt Holloway brought up the burning of the gas, how long is that agreement good for? I know we signed it about 10 years ago, because it's not long after it came on the council.
I want to say it's on a 5-year or 10-year renewal period. I'm thinking it's 5. And I'm not sure what the expiration date is.
Yeah.
So the total, is it 5,260 or is it 522? I tried to.
Yeah, it's the 5,260.38. 5,260,638.
And they're recommending the transfer of 300,000, so that we would be requesting a total project account of 5.3 million, just in case if there's any change orders or.
I tried adding the base bid with the alternates, and I didn't come up with that 5,260. What am I missing? Math. And And we chose, which alternate did we choose?
The first one, alternate 1, 2.
A12.
I just did the simple thing, put them together, I got 5667.
John, you're looking at Allen Myers. The low bid is actually Adel Construction.
Ah,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
There you go. Yeah. I was like, it started, it's adding up.
Thanks. I missed that, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry about that. And that's okay, that alternate A1 is quite satisfactory with everybody, right?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that is the clay layer. What you can do is you can use a less permeable clay and then put a geosynthetic liner, so something to help capture that, to make up for the clay.
Yeah, and we have NDE approval on it as well.
Where do they mine that clay from?
They're gonna be trying to get a large chunk of it out of the borrow pit that we have over there off of Naylor Mill Road. Originally, when we started mining out there, we were getting nice, good fill dirt, and we've gotten into a section now that's probably about an 8-foot thick section of clay. So the goal is gonna be to use that clay as much as possible, and then we'll have to augment that with the geosynthetic clay liner, different special engineered clay.
Where did you say the clay would come from on Naylor Mill Road?
The existing borrow pit that we're currently mining our daily cover from.
Is that the one that we're discussing donation?
No, we're talking.
That's not the same one.
If you're out on Naylor Mill and you look at across from the landfill, there's that big pond area. That's the borrow pit. If you go towards the side that's closest to 50, where there's actually active equipment going on, that's where we're going to pull the clay from.
So if we didn't have that, we would have a lot more added expense.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Correct.
We'd probably have to haul the additional clay in from other locations.
Now, will we do that, or will the company that's building this do that?
We've got some of it just stockpiled up, because again, we have to dig through the clay to get to our, to get to the fill. But yeah, if there's additional, they'll be mining it for us. They'll dig through.
When we find clay is useful for the base of the landfills, and then when we cap a section, so when we are done with one of the sections, we put a clay liner on top. And by saving the clay, kind of putting it off to the side, that saves us in cost overall.
And that clay's permeable?
Yeah, well, all dirt's permeable. It's just a matter of how permeable it is.
Just slower.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a tighter clay.
Okay.
What process do we need to follow?
The next step would be to have a public hearing, and
Okay.
we can have that on November the 7th at 6 p.m.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good work.
The next item on the agenda is an update on Barron Creek, and that is also by Mr. Dallas Baker.
Need me to reintroduce myself? So Barron Creek, we have we've been working with KCI and the Center for Watershed Protection to figure out the best way to go about restoring Barron Creek. There's been some discussion about trying to get some WIP credits out of restoring that pond bottom to its natural state. So we had KCI come out, take a look at the site, give us an estimate for what they would think it would cost for returning the road to its original condition. And then we had Center for Watershed Protection came out and had them look at the area upstream. There were some questions that Center for Watershed Protection kind of needed answered that were a little bit beyond their ability to ascertain. So we've taken some of the information that Center for Watershed needed and added that to KCI scope. So while they're out there surveying and such, they would extend that survey data out and do some additional hydraulic and hydrology analysis. We've gotten that estimate back in September, and right now we are looking for funding to move forward with KCI's estimate. Now, the estimate we did get from them is just for the first 30%, simply because there's a lot of unknowns right now as far as where are the wetlands at, where's the forestry boundary at, are we gonna have to put in fish passage, is the dirt there good enough to support a box culvert, or are we gonna have to put in pipes and such like that. So right now there's a lot of variables in play that depends on the existing conditions. So the first 30% carries a good price tag with it, and then the next part would actually, the last 70% would actually cost less than the first 30, simply because when we've got those questions answered as far as what MDE is going to allow us to do with restoring the flow.
Questions?
So I didn't see the estimate in our package here. What was the total amount for the 30%?
The 30% right now is $112,425.
Okay. So we don't know whether we're still within the $500,000 project estimate from the CIP, right?
We think we're probably gonna have to increase that, simply because if you go out there and you look at the way the shape of the stream flow through the pond bottom has returned, draw here real fast. So the flow through the road doesn't just come straight across. Right. It actually kind of comes around and does a hook, almost like a question mark, and skirts the edge of the road. If we leave that path of the stream bed like that, it presents the problem of potentially eroding the side of the road that we just built. So what we'd like to do is go in and restore that stream bottom so that it's more of a shot directly through where the future crossing will be, and avoid that erosion and potential future washouts. That's why we're seeing probably our construction cost estimate go up. Conversely, we could potentially armor the side of the road as opposed to relocating that stream bed, and that's one of the questions that we're going to ask KCI to give us an answer on is, hey, what's the most cost benefit? Or is it cheaper to relocate the stream, or is it going to be cheaper to just to armor up the side of the road?
Well, if you raise the pond, wouldn't that eliminate that problem?
Well, we're not raising the pond, and no, I mean, the way the path of that channel has formed now, you would need to have that water almost flood up about a foot or two above, probably about 2 feet out of its existing stream bed in order to start going over top of the land that's out there. Yes.
So the pond will not be restored?
No, we are not restoring the pond.
So a couple questions. So right now where the path is, it's basically kind of the middle of the road now, kind of, where it broke through. And it used to be going up much closer to the house, the Suggs house. So where are you talking about relocating it to where it was by the Suggs house, keeping it in the middle, or having it go further down? Where are you talking about relocating the stream bed?
In theory, right now, it would be probably the most cost. It would probably be the least cost to put the stream bed where the opening is now. Because if we put the stream bed back to where that outfall structure was for the dam, now we're going to have to do additional excavating. So it's probably going to be cheaper to put it back where wash the road out. That said, it's going to depend a lot on what MDE allows us to do. We're not trying to put a dam back in, so I think there would be some flexibility from them as far as where that crossing is going to go, and that's what the hydraulic and hydrology analysis will show us.
Okay, and what can you explain why MDE would have an opinion on that? I mean, what is their role?
It's gonna depend on a couple things. One, where they interpret the wetlands are at, what they interpret tidal influence, non-tidal influence, where they put, okay, this is where the fish naturally wanted to go. So I mean, a unique situation in that we had a pond and a dam, and now we don't. So that's kind of where all these questions come in as far as, well, you know, if we have to put in fish pashes. Common sense kind of says, let's just drop the pipes or culvert in where the existing pond is right now. That said, environmental regulations don't always follow common sense. So they may say, okay, well, that's where it was at. So historically, there's been a plunge pool, and we've had some kind of, you know, fish spawning in that plunge pool area. And that's where they are naturally want to go. And those types of questions are what we have to have the discussion with MDE about.
Have you worked any with, I guess it's the Atkins Historical folks own the other side of the road, you know, where the water is coming into now? Are you working with them any to determine, you know, kind of how they are impacted?
No, I've not worked with them directly. We are aware that they have that historical easement downstream, or on the, you know, downstream where the road is. Yeah. It's our goal to minimize the impact to that easement. We understand there's a preference from potential downstream folks to have the pond back. Yeah. So there may be some reluctance if we're not putting the pond back that to work with us. So we're trying to minimize the impact from the downstream owners as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would encourage you to talk with them and work.
Oh
with
yeah,
them,
we'll have
yeah.
to as this project moves forward.
So in terms of the pond not coming back, is it, you know, it's not going to be a 3 or 4 foot pond, obviously, but
No.
is it going to be raised up so it's at least, you know, flooded there any, or is it just going to be a stream?
That's part of what the hydrologic analysis will show us, and what we can do is, or what we'll be doing is evaluating how we're going to get the most WIP credits out of this project. It might be that it's designed to carry its existing water, and then under, say, a 10-year storm, raise up to a foot or two in the pond where the area was, then slowly infiltrate back into the ground. That might give us the most, or it might be that, hey, we want to raise the water level up a little bit higher, so that it has like a low level marshy area.
Yeah. And what about the property? I mean, you know, there's the road and the pond bed, but then there's other property too. Is there a discussion on what to do with that?
My understanding is that that's being subdivided off. And
okay.
That's probably for you, Wayne.
Yeah, no, I can.
or what?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We wanted to wait until all the surveying work was done and to see what we needed of that property before we sold it. The owner, former owner, has recently moved all their material out. They were given an extension, so it should be completely ours at this date. So really, it's dependent on what features may be needed for WIP purposes. Okay. So that's.
Did you want to add anything, Wayne?
We will subdivide an appropriate sized parcel and sell that property, the home and the subdivided lot. But we still don't have our bearings on how large that lot can be until we're a little bit further along with the engineering
okay.
of the WIP and the road.
Sounds great.
Larry?
Yeah, Councilman Kilmer asked a lot of good questions, and he touched on my question about the pond. I know that was one of the options that we discussed previously about restoring the pond, and that there was some recreational benefit to that. Why are we not restoring it now?
Well, number one, it just adds to our inventory of dams that we are currently maintaining. You know, if we can take that out of the inventory, it costs us less money. There's an annual inspection process with a lot of these dams, with going in and maintaining them. So we're trying to reduce that inventory of dams, but then there's also again the WIP process. You know, if we just go in and flood everything back up and fill the pond back up to where it was, there's potentially zero WIP credit available.
How many people have you heard from that want the pond?
No one's called my office directly. No.
It came up during public. It came up during public hearing. It seemed like Just from the meetings I attended, 80% of the people wanted the road back, period.
That was a big concern.
That was the biggest concern. There was still a sizable group that wanted the pond back, but to bring the pond back, dam safety has basically been talking to us, and we would have to rebuild the whole section to meet modern dam standards. That
Right.
we'd have to tear everything out because it was an old mill dam.
And funding was an issue.
Funding would be an issue.
And if we owned it, we'd be liable.
And like Dallas was saying, every dam we have on our inventory, when we have a hurricane coming, MDE sending us an email, make sure they're maintained. They do annual inspections and they give us to-do list. And if we don't get to the to-do list in time, we get administrative orders. So having one less on the inventory is a net positive. Now, we haven't had to take care of this one to the level of the other ones because it's been viewed as a private dam. If it becomes a county dam, that's just one more. Our overall operation and maintenance would need to go up in the roads budget to help maintain that after we pay the multi-million-dollar cost to put it back.
So
And
without
that's the challenge of the fact that we don't own that downstream slope. It's part of the historic trust.
So in the long run, without the pond, we're not gonna have a negative impact with flooding?
We're not gonna flood evermore?
Right. Is that gonna help with not, seeing a lot of flooding in that area?
I would say, anything has the potential to flood. I'm not gonna sit here and say it'll never
unanticipated.
flood again. But no, we're certainly gonna put large enough pipe sizes in that it shouldn't overtop or flood the road unless we get a very substantial rain.
But I mean, is that gonna be kind of possibly used as more of maybe a retaining pond, that kind of, 'cause a lot of, there's a large area of water that collects coming into that. So I mean, that could be used, like you were talking of, as, it can collect water for a while and kind of help moderate some of this runoff issue. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that potential does exist.
That area will eventually turn into a swamp, probably. I mean, instead of just a pond bed like it is now, probably trees will grow and, it'll flood during certain times.
Yeah, we're already seeing a lot of growth coming back already out there.
What's, because people ask, what is the timeline? I'm assuming that because it is a project, it's a legitimate project. Do you have a timeline established as far as, 9 months out, 1 year out?
Well, the first part is gonna be just securing the funding for it. Once we have that, I suspect the design is probably gonna take 9 months or so to complete, and then after that, probably another 9 months or so for construction.
So it's, so you're talking a year and a half to 2 years before the road's rebuilt?
Potentially, yeah.
Any way to speed that up?
Give me the money right now.
Well,
Anyway, to speed up some of
There's
the
certainly things we can ask them to try to speed that up as much as possible.
The state agencies that would be permitting this, both DNR and MDE, have all been open and willing to assist with this. So, we got from our conversations that they'll help expedite any permitting we need.
I think it was a positive move forward when we invited them down on site and they got a first-hand look at it.
I agree.
I think we've got some good advice.
I want to express appreciation for doing this project. It's, thank you for moving forward with it and making it happen. I know people in the area are definitely concerned about it, and they ask about it, so thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
Good work.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Hurley. This time we open the floor for public comments. If you have any comments that you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name and your concern.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ashanti, President of Wicomico County NAACP, and as always, I thank God for the opportunity to be here. To President Cannon, members of the County Council, and all those assembled, again, good morning. Just to clarify something, The NAACP meetings are set routinely in stone unless the weather dictates. So we don't look at what other folks are doing. We let people make up their mind as to where they need to go. And as far as the opiate situation, long before the governor and the county decided that it was a crisis, it's been a crisis for years in the Black community. So we just didn't get alarmed when the governor or whoever said it was a crisis. It's been one in the Black community. The other thing is on October the 19th, we will be having our meeting 7 o'clock. Joe Morris will talk about fraud protection, and then we will have a speaker, Ms. Bonnie Walston, to talk about special education. In November, which is the third Thursday of the month, we are inviting the Eastern Shore delegation of the General Assembly to speak to us. And of course, at the annual meeting, we always invite you all to attend. The meeting is at 7 and the reception is at 6. Just for the record, I'd just like to have it in the record. In the NAACP, we will always be concerned when an inmate dies while in custody, whether on work release or whatever. We don't really care about the color of his or her skin. It's a human being. So we're not going to make this a media event or whatever. The family of anyone that died have certain privileges and whatever, and we respect that. So I just wanted to share that. We did ask the question about the safety issue and whatever, and the county did respond. And so that is the end of that for the NAACP. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, President Shawnee. Any other public comments? Seeing none, that concludes public comments. Council comments. The presidential comments, we had a beer festival last weekend, and it, from what I understand, it went very well. And also we attended a couple of council members I know attended the NAACP Freedom Fund Banquet, which was as always, a nice event. The wine festival is this weekend. Okay, thought so. So that's Saturday and Sunday. So that's something for everybody to look forward to in case you're not the beer drinker, then you have the wine available. We cover all bases. That's all for presidential comments. Entertain a motion, if I could, to adjourn so that we can go into an open work session followed by a closed work session.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. First item on the agenda is the lease amendment. The personnel manual, as Mrs. Hurley said, has been postponed. Okay. And we have Mrs. Dawn Beach.
Good morning, Council.
Good morning. How are you?
morning.
So the lease today is TSA, and it is a routine annual lease that is government, U.S. federal government, so it's a canned lease that GSA provides and provides to us for council's review. And that lease is for 2 items. One is their office space, the other is for their holding area inside the secure where TSA clears everybody to go prior to departure.
Okay. Questions from council?
Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I don't think we have a lot of questions on it. Yeah.
It sounds like it.
Well,
Been done lots before.
anything else you'd like to cover since you made the trip over?
Thank you for coming out this Friday. Look forward to seeing everybody.
Great. Yeah, thanks for setting it up. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Great. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
I make one
Yes,
comment on
you
that?
may.
That does require a public hearing.
Yes.
And we can have that at the second meeting in November.
Okay.
November the 21st.
Very good.
Lease expires Friday.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. When you say the lease expires Friday, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. This is the time frame we have to work within. Okay,
Just a note.
right. Okay.
Why wasn't it presented to us prior to this?
It was presented, and I got tied up with some other things that were going on at the airport, and it got delayed.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, we have, let's see. Well, I guess the next item on the agenda is the Board of Education.
Put that right here.
We don't have anything else we can put in place, so I guess we'll have to take a recess for the 25 minutes.
Can we
Yes.
do any of the closed work sessions?
Yeah, why not that?
Well, yeah, certainly, we could go in and out, that's all right. So I entertain a motion to adjourn so that we can go into closed session.
Are we doing the urban services one first?
Let's go
Mr.
into-
Maloney will be here for that one,
Oh,
so
okay.
if we could do perhaps the acquisition of land.
Sure.
So you need a motion.
Entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go to closed session. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We're now in closed session.